Are we the baddies? The thing is, you don't want to ask that question. But that's the important question to ask. She went to him and asked him, am I doing something bad? And his response was really interesting. It was something like, what? How the fuck does that work? Well, how the fuck that works is because the enemy was right about pretty much everything. Hello. Those of you on video, you may notice I'm wearing a very colorful shirt, which is not usual. I usually wear like a black t-shirt or something. I think it's one of those days I just feel absolutely insane, kind of crazy, kind of weird. Maybe it's the world situation. Maybe it's the number of memes I've been consuming last night before I went to bed and the weird dreams I had. Anywho, life's weird. Memes save us. So what's on my mind today? I was thinking about Alison Mack. Around 2018, before she was arrested, she went to volleyball one night, as she did whenever there was volleyball, and she wanted to talk to Raniere. So I understand. And she went to him, in a break, and asked him, am I doing something bad? And his response was really interesting. Now, I wasn't there. Bonnie and I got this information from somebody else who was there. And his response was really interesting. It was something like, I can't believe you would ask something like this right now when we're under attack, when I'm under attack. And I think he sort of suggested that she was making this all about herself. And it was a very smart move on his part to sort of gaslight her and to switch it around, because I think what was going on was that she was beginning to ask questions about what she was doing as a slave master. Because what had happened at this point is there was a lot of information on the internet. The Frank report had come out with a lot of information. I think at this point, the New York Times had come out with their expose. And so for whatever reason, and I can explain that one day, she was wondering if maybe she was doing something bad. And let me just try and explain it. For whatever reason I'm not sure if she inherently knew what was bad and what was not bad. I think she had to calculate it. And I think based on the amount of pressure she was getting, I think she then wondered, am I doing something bad? So he turned the whole thing around on her, which was convenient because what the upper ranks were constantly accusing her of was being extremely narcissistic and self-centered, having no moral center. And so she was tasked with trying to be more authentic, trying to be more honest, trying to get feedback from everybody, as people are tasked to do in cults. So she would go to people and ask them to give her feedback. And so because she was working on this not being narcissistic and self-centered thing, it was the perfect thing for him to say, to suggest that her asking, am I doing something bad, was a self-centered question. And he flipped it back on himself. What about me? Keith Raniere, the ultimate victim. And he was telling other people, because people were asking questions. And the narrative that he was spinning was that the organization is bleeding and now's not the time to be asking those questions. Okay, maybe the questions are good questions, but now's not the time. The organization's bleeding. Let's stop the bleeding and then we can address those questions. And the truth is, had it gone that way, had the bleeding been stopped, those questions would never have been asked. There would be some other reason why one should not question the system. So it was a very effective strategy on his part. And what I heard was that she basically felt quite ashamed that she'd even asked that question and then stopped asking the question. And then, probably, I imagine, doubled down. And everybody was doubling down. So it got me thinking about this strategy of let's not question what we're doing. Because I wonder, if that has applications in the world. And the answer is yes, of course it fucking does. I'm seeing more and more that, let's say I'm on a team. Let's say politically I'm on a team. And let's say my team is doing things that are problematic. It's very important to not look at those problematic things, and especially important because the enemy keeps pointing out these things that we're doing. So what we have to do is we have to sort of erase it from existence and pretend we're not doing it. Because if we were to acknowledge we're doing it, they would win, and we can't have them win. And this is a really interesting sort of cult-like phenomena that occurs. I honestly don't think it's a cult-like phenomenon. I think it's just a human phenomena. But you see it very, very starkly in cults, and I saw it very starkly in NXIVM. I mean, just to digress for a second, there was a very high-ranking member that, as the cult was falling apart, and also because Raniere was starving her and driving her crazy, she would get up in front of the entire organization, and she would say shit that was just batshit crazy. Like, she would say shit that made no fucking sense. And everybody had a sense of like, what the fuck is she talking about? Like, she's insane. But the thing is, to question her, because she was one of the sort of right-hand people with Raniere, who'd been with him sort of almost the longest ever, to question what she's saying and to sort of acknowledge that she's batshit crazy would be to then have to question Raniere and question the entire system. So everybody just sort of smiled and clapped and praised her, while he had eroded basically her fucking soul over decades. And so there's this kind of craziness that starts to go on as the cult is falling to pieces. And I think it's a result, of the personality being so fragmented. So I'm seeing that happen on a larger scale. I'm seeing people very fragmented right now, where they're doing things that go against their own values because they're part of a team, and the team has to win because the others are so evil. So they're doing things that go against their most cherished values, but they can't admit they're doing it because the other side is saying that they're doing it. And so to fortify themselves, they have to deny that they're doing it, and they cannot actually look at just information that's right in front of them. So their ability to think rationally or critically is completely gone, which is funny. Just to go back to NXIVM for a second, the entire thing was built on the idea of creating rational, ethical, moral thinkers. And what I began to see at the very end was like, Jesus, there's no rationality here whatsoever. Like, that's what's being sold. That's what we're being told we're being, is rational and ethical. But there's some really fucked up shit going on. And I started to see people, because we were challenging people as we were leaving, say, this is happening. And they'd say, no, that's not happening. We're like, what do you mean it's not happening? Like 2 months ago, you said it was happening. So there's a kind of psychosis that begins to occur. And I see the psychosis on a larger level. I see that because it's so important that the other side be wrong, nothing they say is allowed to have any veracity or any validity or any value. So the other side, the others, might be pointing out things that really are objectively immoral or evil or criminal, but you can't allow them to be true. So what you have to do then is actually fortify and defend the immoral, unethical, or criminal behavior. And because that doesn't really work, in a person that has conscience, what you have to start doing is explaining it away, is rationalizing it, making it okay. I see that, for instance, there's one political party right now that seems to talk nonstop about sex trafficking, child trafficking, pedophilia, and that kind of thing, which really is happening in the world. I'm aware of a lot of people that are working on this. Nonpartisan, bipartisan, working on this issue. And then the other political party, because they just can't allow this political party to be right about anything, denies that those things are happening. And if it is happening, it's not happening at the scale that they're saying it's happening. And it's certainly not happening at high levels like they say it's happening. But it is. It is happening. Hollywood, for instance, fucking and politics stinks of all kinds of nasty, nasty shit. And what's happening right now is that if you start to talk about those things, because people are literally repeating news talking points, anybody that starts to talk about child trafficking, sex trafficking, pedophilia is an extremist. Like, and what? Like, how the fuck does that work? Well, how the fuck that works is because you have to make them wrong. And if they're talking about those things, that has to be wrong. It must not be happening. And so literally what you do is you mask abusive behavior going on in the world, and you literally are supporting the very thing that you think is evil, or a year ago you thought was evil. Now suddenly it's okay. And as I said, there's a psychosis that starts to happen. And I saw something recently I thought was fascinating. There's one political candidate, and again, I don't want to get into, naming people. You all know who I'm talking about. There's one political candidate who has been running on this platform of health, and there's a lot of veracity to the things this person and this movement talks about in terms of, like, some of the stuff that polluters have done, some of the stuff that food manufacturers have done, some of the stuff that Big Pharma has done. And then I saw, I think it was Time Magazine or something, say that, well, maybe ultra-processed food is not so bad. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Maybe it's not so bad. And then they have all these nutritional experts that are saying it's not actually that bad. And I'm thinking, like, where did they find these people? Like, where did they find these people that for either attention or fame, or they're being paid, or I don't know what the fuck is going on, that they're literally saying, well, ultra-processed food is not actually that bad, when everybody with common sense knows it's really bad. But the reason it can't be bad is because the enemy is saying it's bad. And so, like a little child who literally has to defy their parent, what people are doing in their different camps is just going against whatever the other party says, whatever the other people say. So now we're at, well, processed food is actually not that bad. But like maybe a few weeks before, or even a month before, and before the enemy said it, they'll be like, it's terrible. It's not good for you. You shouldn't be eating it. Why is America so unhealthy? So again, I go back to the psychosis, and this is what being in a cult taught me, because I know I was like that too. I know that I was led to believe that anybody that left the cult and said anything, it was all wrong. And so you don't even examine what you're actually doing or what you're participating in. You just have to make the others wrong. So if they say the leader is doing inappropriate things with women, like, well, I mean, maybe that's not going on, or whatever it is, or maybe they're lying, and then you wake up and you realize, holy fucking shit, it was all true. The enemy was right about pretty much everything. The stuff that came out in the Frank Report, 2017, before the New York Times finally fucking broke the news, most of it was accurate. But the people inside, and I was once one of those people, had to just make it wrong. And so you couldn't look at what was actually happening in the organization. So what happens is people really break their own moral code. This is the problem with this kind of thinking, is you have a moral code of things you think are important, and you start to break your moral code because you need so badly for the enemy to be wrong, and therefore the leader and us to be right, that you go against your own principles. And I do think that if you have conscience, you start to develop kind of a psychosis. Now, if you don't have conscience, it's not a problem. It's merely a perspective, and it doesn't really matter. But if you do have conscience, which I think most people do, you start to feel absolutely fucking psychotic. So I bring this up, and I bring the situation with Alison Mack up because it was so illustrative of, a moment where she began to ask the right question, and then she was literally cut off at the knees, and she stopped asking the right question and got arrested. And, finally, through some kind of self-examination, woke up and realized, oh, what I was doing was bad. I think it's really important to see this pattern of what happens with the us and theming. And I got to say, and you know, people may get offended by this. They're very smart people that I know. When I say smart, I say book smart. They're very, very book smart people that I know that read something, you know, in a paper or watch something on the news, and the next thing they're on Twitter railing against, you know, whoever the others are, saying shit that's not actually accurate because they're so fired up because they have to make the others wrong. And some of these people, by the way, are fucking mental health experts. Experts in mental health, cult experts who know that otherizing people is the beginning of horror, and yet they do it. Book smart, not necessarily emotionally intelligent. So if the very, very smart people are doing it, you know, I think, let's just say a lot of people are doing it right now. I think it's really, really problematic. And I think, you know, it would be good to say, okay, I'm being accused of this thing. Is this thing true? Is my team doing this? And maybe my team is, and then you go and talk to your team. You know, you say, hey, this thing we're doing is bad. Now, is it going to go well? No, it's not going to go well. And why do I know? Because the team's become like a cult. They're going to vilify you, calling you an apologist of some kind for the others, because you're questioning, you know, what we're doing. I love that TV show that I never saw the whole thing, but just a little excerpt that the two British guys and the two Nazis, and the one says, are we the baddies? The thing is, you don't want to ask that question. But that's the important question to ask. Okay, it's fine to point out what the others are doing, but like in the process of trying to destroy them and hate them and build cases against them, like what are we doing? And are we compromising our own ethics, our own deepest, most cherished values? Because I think a lot of bad shit is going on right now. Because let's just take America for a second. Each side has the hill they want to die on. And I think they're both shit hills. Because I think there's a lot of damage happening because they want to die on these hills. So that has been what has been on my mind. All I can say is, as always, motherfuckers, stay curious.